BinMaster really has its roots in agriculture, coming out of Lincoln, Nebraska. Our first devices were used in the agriculture industry by farmers. My territory doesn't have a lot of agriculture. We grow peaches where I live, and peanuts maybe. They put those in bins, but for the most part, I would say that my territory is more industrial and less agricultural. I have a lot of plastics manufacturing in my part of the world. There are a lot of auto manufacturers and thus their suppliers who I work with in the Southeast. Cement is big everywhere, but it's definitely one of my primary industries. Having worked not only for a manufacturer of level controls, but also having been a manufacturer's rep for a while, I've worked with a lot of different process equipment, and so I think that helps me when I go out and call on customers, that I can kind of speak to their processes, what they're trying to do with our equipment, what they're trying to interface with. I've got some experience with some of that other equipment. So
I've been with BinMaster going on 14 years. The region I handle is now called the Great Lakes region, and I have Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan, and then I also handle Eastern Canada. Pretty diverse area. I have a little bit of everything from agricultural to industrial, cements, aggregates, a lot of plastics in the Chicago area. So pretty diverse. Find myself working with all different types of accounts from day to day, different types of distributors, different types of resellers. So it's pretty diverse with what I'm working with. I'm married. We have 5 kids, 14 grandkids. Live in northern Illinois, and that keeps us pretty busy. Everybody's relatively close to one another, so we get together frequently. Maybe a little too frequently, in my opinion, but my wife believes something else. But no, we're blessed, absolutely. Well, it started several years ago, and I think it was obviously driven by marketing. They thought that this was a tool, and I had a little bit of experience with it from my past life, and saw that it had some value. And I think we dedicated some resource to it, and I think it's been well received from our customers. And for the most part, I think it's pretty successful. There are some times when you kind of get into a situation where you need to tell the customer, hey, at this point, we're better off just having a conversation, because we could be exchanging in this chat for an hour, and I would still have a myriad of questions to ask you. But I think the customers like it. People come in and get the information they're looking for, and they're able to be on their way. I think people, I think now, everybody kind of likes to hide behind a keyboard a little bit, so if they don't have to make a telephone call, I think people appreciate that. So I think it does have some value, and I think it is well appreciated from the customers.
I know from my experience as a customer that I always prefer to chat when I'm on a website, when I have a question about something, rather than picking up a phone. BinMaster's great about always getting, somebody to pick up the phone, a live person when you call in to the factory here. But our customers don't always know that. I mean, that's not really the norm. So I think, if you're on a website, you're sometimes a little hesitant to, dial an 800 number when you don't know, our business is very important to you, So I think you're right. I think the chat has value. I think it's something that I appreciate as a customer. So I think our customers appreciate it.
And I think the people that are involved with it put a lot of effort into trying to do a good job with it. Trying to take care of the customer and provide them with the answers they're looking for and links and things like that. So I do believe it's well received, and I think that our customers would agree that it's effective.
Mm-hmm.
All right, competition. Who has the most unusual application for our system? Rich, you start.
The most unusual. Okay, you're hitting me cold. Let me think about this. The most unusual application. You go first.
I'm drawing a blank.
The ones that come to mind actually are applications that I didn't necessarily come across while working for BinMaster. I've I've made calls at a nuclear waste facility, which was, I mean, there are guys with machine guns, that pat you down in and out of that place and so forth. There's one that Archer told me about recently that there's apparently a plant in North Carolina. He was at their facility in Ohio recently, but they breed flies as an alternate protein source. Yeah, exactly. Strange applications I've encountered in my career. There was a place up in Ohio, actually, northern Ohio, that took the solid waste from municipal water treatment plants and turned it into fertilizer. But it was, I don't know what you have to pay people to work at this place. They have what they call the reactor room, and there are 4 pits. They are 20 foot wide, 10 feet deep, and 700 feet long, all full. And they got a machine that goes through and churns it up. And it sits in there for like 2 months until they turn it into fertilizer. So that's a story that I find myself telling fairly often. Well, okay, so you deal with furnaces and kilns a lot in our industry, in the cement industry, in the wood industry. And those are some interesting applications. You look into these things. It's usually you're staring through glass that's a foot thick, and it's only this big. But it looks like the gates of hell. It really does. It's really. That's one of the things that I think I enjoy the most about my job is that you get to see the sausage being made in so many different industries. You get to see the processes behind the scenes that most people don't see unless they work there, and they're generally only going to see that in one industry, where we get to see it across industries, and it's one of the things I think that keeps the job interesting.
I always enjoy going to some of the manufacturing where you see something you're familiar with being manufactured, especially in the plastics industry, or going into a food place, where you're seeing things. And, it's not uncommon to get a free sample of things. So I've come home with tortilla shells and bagels and, candy from a couple of different places. And, rendering plants are never fun to go to. They're never good.
No.
And I remember years ago, it was summer, hot and humid. Went to a rendering plant call in the morning, and later that afternoon I was flying out. And,
You
I
make
get on
the
the
rendering
airplane,
plant your last call of the day, not your first call.
I get on
of the
this
day.
this Southwest airplane going back to Chicago, and I'm like, that's me.
Yeah.
You literally smelled like death. And I was at another plant that was quite interesting. This was years ago. They made blasting caps. So they had all of these small buildings you would go, had all of this with stuff. And I said, well, why are there so many small buildings instead of just one large building? And they said, well, if something goes wrong, we don't lose everybody. So it keeps it interesting, that's for sure.
Wow. You guys are good at telling gross stories. You tell your wives these things?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
My wife doesn't like it, if you go up on she doesn't like it when we're at height, They typically don't appreciate that.
I suppose the customers appreciate not doing that either.
Yeah, and then,
That's interesting. When I first got into this business, I guess climbing silos just wasn't any big deal. Nowadays, people really people don't want their employees climbing them. They don't want they don't want to climb them. It just seems like over time that's become a bigger deal to people. Maybe they're just thinking more about safety than they have in the past.
I was at it was a plant with some explosive materials, and we were given a little outfit to put on, and a hard hat, and the visitors had a different colored hard hat than everybody else, and I said, what's the purpose of having a different colored hard hat? And he said, well, that's so we can find your head if there's an explosion.
Yeah, right. Identifies you as a visitor. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
So you got to appreciate a little bit of dark humor from time to time. But
on the perhaps the more palatable side of the business, the food industry really has some of the coolest equipment. I talked about being, seeing behind the scenes, peeking behind the curtain of how things are made. The food industry has got some of the coolest processing equipment. I think I always enjoy just, it's almost custom made by products. I mean, you don't think about how Fruit Loops are made, but then you actually see the process and it's like, okay, that's really interesting. Or I once saw a mountain of Cheetos that had to be 20 feet high, but it was before they had the cheese powder added to them, so they were like beige, which is odd to see a mountain of beige Cheetos. They look almost like packing peanuts,
We could, maybe just go. The 3D level scanner is a very unique piece of equipment. There's really nothing else on the market that does what it does, as it has the ability to measure multiple points on the surface of the material over a broad beam angle. Most of the other sensors we sell are single point devices, where they're just measuring where it physically touches or where it measures within a narrow beam. But this can read the surface over, like I said, a broad beam angle. So we can take into consideration peaks and valleys in some of these larger diameter vessels. So if somebody's looking for volumetric accuracy, the 3D level scanner is really about the only product that can take into consideration the surface of the material over the entire diameter of the vessel, taking into consideration the peaks and valleys. And a lot of customers really appreciate the additional amount of information they can glean from this type of a sensor. Well, you see a lot of it really in the agricultural markets. I think that's where it probably has had its greatest impact, because often they have the larger diameter vessels, and sometimes they have multiple fill points, multiple discharge points, and there was really never a good way to know how much material you have. Yeah, they understood what a single point device could bring them, but it wasn't giving them the volumetric accuracy they were looking for. So it's particularly going to be in the larger diameter vessels in the grain industry, ethanol. We certainly see a lot of it. Cements, again, you see some of it in some of those great big cement silos that are out there. And again, like I said, it's quite unique in how the sensor operates and what it can provide.
Well, yeah, so the 3D scanner, people see it online, they see the pretty pictures, and they think, wow, that's really cool, because, I think everybody struggles with the whole geometry question of, your material sits like this after you fill, and then it turns like this, and when you're measuring to a single point on the surface, how do I really know what's in my silo? And a lot of people struggle with that. The answer for most of the industry is geometry. If we've got a single point of fill and a single point of discharge, we can generally find a good single spot to measure to that gives us a good representation of what's in the silo. So, I would say probably half of the people that come to me and say, I want the level scanner, is not necessarily the best fit for their application. Okay, Mr. Customer, you've got a 12-foot diameter silo with plastic pellets in it. That sits in a pretty predictable fashion. The level scanner really shines in applications where things aren't predictable, where you have multiple fill points and multiple discharge points, where they're really big silos, where you're pulling out of it with a front end loader, or and the material's just all over like this. In a silo like that, what point do you aim at, to give you a good representation of what's in there, or points even if you get multiple points, you don't know that it's going to be where your peak is, or those are the kind of applications that the 3D scanner really shines in. It's non-free flowing materials, so things that like just build a cliff, as it's pulling out of the silo. It's domes. Some materials are stored in flat storage domes. It really isn't a single point way to measure that. It's got to be done with something like the level scanner.
And the version of the sensor that provides the 3D graphical representation of the surface of the material available on the PC has been used by customers where they're just looking to determine how much material is building up on the sidewall, where they had something that was extremely sticky. It would build up on the sidewall, and then that sidewall would collapse, and they actually blew out the wall of a silo. So they were just looking to monitor to see how thick that buildup was getting on the side. They weren't so much concerned with volumetric accuracy. They just wanted to have the ability to see inside of that silo to know what was going on, so their situation wouldn't get critical.
Likewise, I had an interesting one where it was a 1,000,000 bushel corn bin, and occasionally they have to go inside and clean it out. Well, they had a case where somebody actually went inside of it. They thought it was empty. The material collapsed, and it was a huge safety issue. Luckily, no one was hurt in that instance, but it caused them to think, okay, we gotta know when that silo is empty.
And sadly, people die in grain bins every year.
Absolutely, yeah.
So these are more for a single point.
Yeah, so really anything besides the 3D level scanner is any other instrument, whether it's a smart bob, whether it's laser, ultrasonic, radar, they're all doing the same thing. We are automating a tape measure. So we're taking a distance measurement from the face of the sensor down to the surface of the material. And from that distance measurement, we're calculating volume based on the parameters of the vessel that we put into it. And then we're calculating weight from there using a bulk density number. So, geometry and math. The 3D scanner, nothing does what the 3D scanner does, no question. But it's not necessarily the right fit for every application. I tell people, you're trying to hunt squirrels with an elephant gun. It's not the least expensive technology on the market. It's complex. I guess I'm a firm believer.
And it can't be used for process control. You would never
Right.
rely on this type of a system to let you know when your vessel is full, stop filling, or when you're empty to start filling.
Right. I'm a big proponent of keep it simple. I like going with the simplest solution that will achieve what you're trying to achieve, and that's not always a level scanner. Right. So point level, we're talking about, do I have material at this point or not? Typically, the most common usage for that would be high and low level alarms. Keep from overfilling the silo, keep from running out of material. But it's kind of the digital versus analog idea. All that tells you is whether you have material at this point. That's really the gold standard for process control, because you have something that is physically making contact with a probe in the process before you shut down conveyors and turn things on and off and activate diverter valves and all that sort of stuff. The continuous level line is really, although some people do use it for process control, it's really designed more for inventory control, trying to manage what you have in your silos, ordering materials on time, making sure that you've got enough for your production schedule, and less about turning things on and off.
And realistic, all of this equipment was really developed to keep people from having to climb on top of silos.
Mm-hmm.
Up until somebody came up with the idea for a plumb bob back 150 years ago, people had to climb on top of their vessels and look in, and there's obviously a lot of danger associated with that, a lot of liability, plus allocating someone's time resource to doing something where they could probably be doing something a little more productive. So the level controls, whether it be point level device for high level shut off, low level startup, or the inventory management system, it's really all about keeping people safe.